Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's live stream. My name is Jacob Hansen. I'm the host of Thoughtful Faith, and today joining me is my good friend, Austin Falter. Austin, how are you, man?
Awesome. Doing pretty good. Thanks.
Good. Well, it's kind of funny. Everyone doesn't know this, but we just tried to start this live stream a second ago, and we didn't hit the go live button, so that was kind of funny. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining as everybody comes in and joins into the live stream tonight. I want to actually make a quick announcement. But before I do, Austin, do you have anything you want to say before I go through a couple little announcements of things that are going on at the channel?
Oh, yeah, I got some, but you go first. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So one of the things I want to start to ask our audience for is for them to submit clips for us to basically to debunk. There's a lot of misinformation online. In fact, demonstrable things that people say that are just not true, and you can show that they're not true. And what I'd like is, I know that a lot of the people that watch the show, they will see things out there online. I know something will come on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And if you were to submit those to us with a specific timestamp, and that's very important, you send me a 45-minute video or 2-hour video of John DeLynn, like, I'm not going to go through and try and find the 100 things that he gets wrong. I want to find the specific timestamp. And so we're going to probably be building some kind of a website form or a link at the bottom of our videos and or both that will then allow you to submit things to us very quickly so that we have a library of stuff to debunk. So you guys can actually help here at Thoughtful Faith to help us correct some of the false things that are out there online. So that's one of the big things coming up. And yeah, so Austin, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm excited about that one. I think one of my areas of focus is shorts. I want to get us on more short form platforms. And we have been. We've been posting 4 times a week on TikTok, Instagram, like pretty much all the YouTube shorts, all the platforms that do that. And one of the best ways to, I think, reach that audience is quick responses as well. And so that's something that with these clip submissions, it's going to help us just do a series of shorts, and that's going to help us reach younger audience, larger audience, just all the things. So shorts is a big focus as well. So if you're not following Instagram, TikTok, some of these, like, go over there. And I know they're terrible places to hang out at times, but Jacob's joining, and so it'll get better.
Yeah, that's the hope. All righty, so we are starting to have some of the chats roll in, and as people filter into the stream, this is an Ask Me Anything situation. So we will be prioritizing super chats. So if you really want to get your question in front of us, we will be looking at those super chats. So as those come in, we'll be taking them. Now, with that in mind, Austin, though, also has a few questions to start off. So as we wait for some of the super chats to come in, Austin, do you want to fire any questions you have for me?
Oh, first and foremost, we'll give people a minute to come in here and type in super chats. When I sent over a branding document to you about, hey, what thumbnail should we be using? You did not even mention my amazing video ideas that I sent with it. So I just want to show off some of these real quick. I'm sharing my screen. You better share this.
I will. I'll share. Here we go.
Okay, so I think some of these are great video ideas. Fedoras and body odor is the first one. Not sure who you'd talk about there, but
I had people literally say when they saw some of these that they were like, "Wait a minute, like, are you making a video about that?" They were like all excited, or like, so it was good stuff.
Okay, big fan of polygamy. It's another one. I think your audience would really love this. I think Michelle Stone's audience would also appreciate you.
Agreed.
You just being open and honest about your opinions here. This is my favorite. My testimony of BYU football.
I already made that video.
I know. Yeah, I know you did. I didn't think we were a football channel, and then like the week I started helping you, you start posting are you like a
Ute fan or something?
I just don't care about sports. Like I just think it's funny.
I knew I was gonna piss off some people with that video.
Really?
Yeah. Do it.
Karl Marx reincarnated. So there's that. Everything. I was gonna label this one "Everything is Marxist," but I wasn't sure. So I went with the rise of the LDS reincarnation theory featuring Kwaku.
That's gonna cause it. That'll cause a stir.
Cause a little rift. I loved that debate. That Columbus debate was just amazing. We got to find more stuff for you to debate.
It was pretty wild. That was a pretty spirited debate.
Taxation is theft and Brigham Young, because why not? And
it's true. Taxation is theft.
Your church is just a Bible study. That'll go.
That was the one. That was the one that somebody shot. It was like, wait a minute, like
with your good friend. And finally, because of our live stream last time, some call me Cloud King. So I know you had some discussion on that.
Seriously, that's funny.
All right, cool.
All right, so any super chats? I don't know if any have come in. If not, I might.
Oh, our super chat's working. Let's see. I just want to double check because last time, we just had someone ask, "What is a super chat?" Monetary donation. Okay, we're cool.
Yes, you make a little monetary donation, and also it ensures that your chat gets put at the highest place for us to see. Somebody asked in just the regular chats, and I'll do some of those. What will I do if Kamala gets elected? I will go about my normal daily business and not freak out thinking the country's going to burn down, because I know that every election of my lifetime, everyone has been like, this is the end of the world if the other side loses.
Yeah.
And guess what? Things will move in a bad direction, in my opinion. I think that that's the nature of it. Actually, my actual prediction is that Kamala Harris will be the most unpopular president ever. I think the woman is just not intelligent at all. I think that she gets in front of a camera and the world ends, and she'll be in front of cameras making real policy decisions, and the American people will despise her. They already didn't like her before. They'll really not like her once she starts governing, and the more they get to know her. And then on top of that, you will have and then I think Republicans will do very well in a midterm election. She will be totally unable to enact her agenda after the 2 years are up. She'll be a lame duck president for most of it. And that's, thank goodness we have the Constitution that keeps things relatively stable, even when you get leaders that are total idiots. So that's my very soft opinion.
There you go. Okay, so when you said that every election of your life, people have said the same thing, right? Makes me think, I keep hearing that with the prophet, because the prophet just talked about Christ is coming, right? That was a big focus of his talk. Yes. And he says he's coming soon, right? And then you have people saying he's coming next year, and they'll like kind of, but then on the other hand, you have the people who are like, oh, they've been saying this forever. Jesus said this, everybody's saying this.
Paul said it. Paul was fully convinced it was going to happen during his lifetime.
What's your take on that? When's he coming?
No man knoweth the day or the hour is actually it. And I tend to have a little bit of this might be a little bit of a controversial opinion as someone who's more of an open theist. I hold to the idea that, I actually, there's a tentative idea that I hold, is that it doesn't have a fixed date. The world will be when the world is ready, when we are ready, when we have done what we need to do in order to prepare the world for his coming, then he will come. It's like he will, and that's the reason nobody knows, is because he decides when, now's the time, like things are ready. The vineyard is ripe and prepared, or whatever it's going to be. And so I think we actually have to do the work of preparing the world for his coming, for making it ready. And so that's why I don't believe that it's a fixed time, because I'm an open theist and I don't believe the future is set in stone.
Cool. That's a good answer.
Actually, I want to elaborate on that one for a second, though.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. A lot of people don't like open theism because they're kind of like, oh, what do you mean God can't, doesn't know the future? Well, the question really becomes, to say that God is all powerful means that God can do, at least in Latter-day Saint theology, God can do all things that it is possible to do. Okay. Now there is a question of, is it even possible for the future to be known if the future is not fixed? Like logically. I don't think it is. I think if you are a truly free creature, if your future is not set in stone as the Calvinists want you to believe, which I think is one of the reasons I respect Calvinism, they take things to its logical conclusion.
Yeah.
They say, look, if God knows the future with total certainty, that means the future cannot be other than what it will be. And therefore, it is fixed. And so if that is the case, then how could you say that it's possible for God to know it perfectly? Now, that isn't to say that I can know with a high degree of certainty that if I put a cupcake in front of my 5-year-old, that he's going to eat that thing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's more complicated than that. But I do think that there's a high level of certainty, but I can't bring myself to, like, I think God knows the future as well as it can be known. So, but I don't believe that that's set in stone, because I don't think that would work. So anyway, that's my thought on it.
Okay.
That's a big.
Here's one. Jeremy Goff says, first super chat. Never mind, Jeremy. You'll have to wait. What are your thoughts on Halloween's correlations with satanic rituals and aligning with demons? I keep seeing videos telling us to stop celebrating. Thank you, Sissy Sue.
Well, thank you, Sissy Sue. And just so you know, my little boy, he dressed up as a police officer this year, and he walked around the neighborhood where people were handing out candy. It was really close to Satanism. I mean, it was basically the same thing. It's you guys, it's little kids dressing up and going out in the neighborhood with their friends to pretend like they're different creatures or whatever and scare each other and ha ha ha. This is not Satanism. In fact, real Satanism, it's stupid for people to think that it's Satanism, because real Satanism exists. Real Satanism is do as thou wilt.
Yeah.
It's much more real than oogly boogly guys hiding in your closet. Okay. Like, that's the real scary thing, is that the satanic ideology, if you actually study it in scriptures, it's my will be done, not thine.
It's selfishness, and it's not, like you say, it's not some abstract. Dude, I might have to bring this up with my bishop, though. His house is the freakiest house on the street, man. He's got all the terrifying. So gotta ask him. That's great.
That's funny.
Okay, we got another one.
All righty.
Jesse says, why did God command Adam and Eve not to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, knowing he wanted them to partake of it and then punish them for doing so?
That is actually a great question. I've thought a lot about it. I'm going to posit my best answer, but I'm not going to say that it's one that I'm super like, yeah, this is absolutely it. I look at a lot of scriptural stories a little bit more loosely and metaphorically, especially ones like the story of Adam and Eve. Okay. I believe that the story of Adam and Eve is a story that was passed down, and that it is not primarily geared as like a literal historical story, although I do believe it is rooted in real history in some way. I don't know that exactly. Sure. Now, the point of the taking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and commanding them not to, it is for them essentially to descend, to go into somewhere that is painful and bad. There's something to be said for God saying that, I don't want you to suffer. I don't, it isn't God's will that we, how do I even describe it? God will never take you from a higher level and push you somewhere lower. Right? So I'm trying to think of how to word this. symbolically, the moving down from higher to lower is the breaking of God's will and command, right? And it required for us to actually go downward. So in a sense, that is, I guess, metaphorically, like going against the will of God. You're going in the wrong direction, right? And so it is, and this is, I'm sorry if people don't like this answer. Maybe someone has a better one, and that's fine. I'm just giving it my best. I've always looked at that as they went contrary to, they had to go downward, and that downward is aligned with the idea of God being against going downward, but he knew that they would go downward. He knew that they would. It's like if you put the cupcake in front of the little kid, right? He's going to eat it.
That's how I've heard that. I was going to ask you what you think of that analogy. A couple people have responded in the chat too, and they say, were they really punished though? Punished or informed? And I think that's the other thing with Latter-day Saint knowledge of this, is that this is a fall forward, right? The fortunate fall, that ultimately, yes, they broke command. There were consequences, but it in the end, there will be an ascension because of it. There will be. So what do you think? How does that play into this?
It does. It works well. I guess my thing is though, why did he command against it? What does it mean for him to say to the little kid, don't eat the cupcake? Why didn't he just put him in there with the cupcake and let it happen? You know what I mean? Why was there an express command against it? And I think to some extent that, and maybe another way of thinking of it is that it leads to the choice. It's sort of like, okay, because I've said not to, there is a, like, you can choose to do this, or you can choose to stay where you are.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And I don't know. I don't have a perfect answer for it. I think that is one of those questions that's harder. The best way I've been around understanding it is that they had to do something that violated, they had to sin essentially in order to break into mortality, as it were. So it's a hard question. I'm open to other answers. If someone has a great answer, come on my show. We can talk about it.
Cool. Okay, next one. Jacob Samuelson says, what is your favorite channel to listen to? Any media outlet, and why?
Shoot. What do I listen to? I listen to a bunch of different things. I listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff. I do enjoy that. I actually, when I'm driving around, sometimes the deeper philosophical, religious stuff, I kind of get over, and I just kind of want to turn on more mindless talk.
Sure.
And so I actually listen to like Ben Shapiro. He's one of my favorite like political commentators. And I know people like can't stand how fast he talks and stuff, but I just feel like kind of, if I want sort of mindless political rambling of people, I don't know why. I guess maybe I grew up listening to talk radio.
Okay.
So
here's a question though. Is it Ben Shapiro? Normally you probably listen double speed like every normal human being, right?
Not
when
on
you
Ben
go to
Shapiro.
Ben, when you go to Ben, where are you listening? Is it 1.25 still, or just straight?
So it's funny. I'm trying to think. I'm going to be releasing a video. I've been meaning to do it for a while on kind of a variety of different people because people ask me like, who do you listen to? Who do you recommend? Who do you read? Like, what should I do? And for me, I have a bunch of different people. Jordan Peterson is one of them. I listen to, I think more social political stuff. Trigonometry, I think is a great show. I don't listen to necessarily a lot of church stuff. More of that stuff I get more from books, audio books. One of the best books I've read lately, if you want some of those, I would highly recommend the book, The Air We Breathe, I believe it's called. It's on the history of Christianity and how it's affected Western civilization. That's a huge one that I loved. There's another one called The Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl. What's his name? I'm hoping to have him on the show. Amazing book on kind of the state of things culturally. And there's a whole bunch. I mean, I can go on and on of different books, but I'm gonna put that out there, kind of my top must listen to and read and follow. I also spend a lot of time listening to antis and people I want to engage with. Other Christians, I listen to people like Trent Horn. I listen to Bishop Robert Barron. I don't listen to a lot of Latter-day Saint content, actually, surprisingly. I spend most of my time listening to others. I'm trying to think who else. Frank Turek stuff. I listen to, I kind of listen to a whole bunch of crap. Religious, political, social, philosophical. On philosophy, there's an interesting channel called Philosophize This. It's it's a really popular sort of philosophy channel that kind of breaks down a lot of philosophy. Actually, a great one. Love this guy. Really interesting thinker. He's the guy that I did the feminism video with.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The Living Philosophy. He's super interesting, and I think he anyway. Just again, really interesting stuff. But anyway, sorry, that one, I'm all over the place with the stuff I listen to, so it's kind of hard for me to pick one.
Okay. We've got more super chats, but real quick, Latter-day Skeptic asks, why do you think the Cultural Hall has such a crush on you? Is it your eyes?
That Latter-day Skeptic, that's my brother for
Yeah.
Yes. I honestly, I don't know that guy. I invited to have him on my show. He said no. He just wants to like go and like talk crap on his channel with Jim Bennett.
Yeah.
Like he had Jim Bennett on. And they just spent like 2 hours like talking about me, about how like mean I am and stuff. I'm like, dude,
so I know,
talk to me like a grown up, bro.
Right. I know weird. You have some friends who are critics of the church, right? This might be, I don't know if this is your brother or not. Critics of the church who just can't stand other critics of the church, and they're constantly being like, bro, is Cultural Hall one of the ones on their radar where they're just roll their eyes?
Cultural Hall is just, he's just like, it isn't even like, there are people who offer intelligent critiques to the church. Sure. And frankly, I enjoy engaging with those people. I think we can have interesting conversations. We can talk about stuff. And then there's just like low-level mudslinging weirdos who just like, they don't have anything intelligent to say. They just like use the same stupid, like, it's like the 15-year-old who's going through that rebellious phase.
Sure.
And then eventually they get embarrassed by it and you kind of look back and you're like, oh, I was kind of an idiot. It's like they get stuck in that phase for the rest of their life. But instead of it being like, my dad is such a jerk, it's like the church, it's just, it's like they get stuck in that phase. And it's pretty pathetic.
Okay. All right, back to super chats. We got to catch up here. First of all, S. Leota, thanks for the super chat.
Thank you, S.
That one. Jacob asks a follow-up. Which channel or any media outlet do you believe is the most damaging to the world, and why?
Instagram and TikTok as a whole. In fact, that's one of the reasons you and I really want to go after that area. It is just a death hole of crappy information, especially when it comes to the church and spiritual things. It's just a den of like weirdo life coaches and like psychopaths who hate the church, putting out constant, just like whiny content. And it's mainly absorbed by like young people and women who are not, who are absorbing it. And it's just bleh. So
last week I kind of went through some of the top creators on TikTok with basically anti-Mormon content. And, you listen to a real critic over on YouTube, you listen to them make arguments and stuff, and you can actually like listen to that content. I spent 30 minutes just scrolling through some of these TikToks, and you just need a shower after. It's just like, you just feel like this is just trash. And it's so, it just brings people down and makes them feel terrible about their life and complain about it. It's not argument. It's just all emotional stuff.
Yep.
And it just, I hate it. So I'm glad we're moving over there.
And I would say, when it's funny, I think YouTube as a space, it kind of, because it has sort of this long form content where people really get the chance to like talk it out, like work through things. And you get a lot of interview shows. It isn't just a person standing in front of the camera a lot of the times. A lot of the times it's people talking. And I think that dialogue and conversation within YouTube has created an environment where I kind of say to people, like, we're kind of winning on YouTube. Like, Like, I think when you actually have the
yeah.
long form conversation, a lot of this kind of just quick mudslinging, it doesn't work as well on YouTube as it does on these other platforms. And so I don't see, like, as much as I have issues with YouTube and like the way they kind of try and control things, I think overall on YouTube, I don't see a lot of channels that are really doing a lot of damage anymore. Maybe John DeLynn was at one time, but the problem is that we all came out, we all started talking about the same stuff,
Sure.
and we talk about it better than he does. And now he's kind of fading, and he's becoming more of, as we've talked about, a cult pornographer
Sure.
rather than an actual critic of the church. Meanwhile, the sort of defenders of the faith have been growing in popularity on that platform and have the momentum. So it's been interesting to see where the shift has kind of been in the anti-Mormon sort of space.
Right. Okay, so Magic Puncher Games sent in a great question. When you and others in your space, such as Ward Radio, critique church bureaucracy and policies, it might sound like some of you are criticizing the prophet and apostles. What do you say about that? I agree with you. Magic Puncher Games, I freaking agree with you here. I love Ward Radio. Drives me crazy when they go too far, and I think they do often. So I want to hear your response, Jacob.
And I would tend to agree that people can go too far with it. Okay, one thing is I think that there does need to be a separation between the brethren who hold the keys and then mid-level church management.
Sure.
Okay, because one of the things that I like to point out, I made a whole video about it, is one of the most popular videos ever, was to point out there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between what they say in conference and then what ends up being implemented in the practices at the mid-levels of the church. And it causes immense confusion and harm. Now, some people go back to the brethren and kind of yell at them about that, and fine. Okay, fine. You can have your opinions on that. But having served in church leadership in a position, I was a branch president on my mission. And I remember it was a really eye-opening experience. I also got to know the mission president. And we had certain rules and things that I didn't like in the mission, or in there were things we had to, but when I was a branch president, all of a sudden we had to do things that I realized we had to do things that I couldn't really explain to everyone, but we had to do them. And it was like, I began to realize there are things a lot of times that you don't have all the information. And so like you need to give some grace there when it comes to some of the leaders at the highest level. And I do even for local leaders. The problem is that sometimes, especially at the mid-level, there are things that are just, and I know that there are people out there that are wolves within the flock. I know they exist. They must exist. Scriptures say they exist. And so I do think we as members have a responsibility to call out when we see bull crap happening in church-sponsored institutions that do not align with the brethren. See, I would criticize, here's where I would criticize the brethren. If the brethren began to go off the rails themselves, if the brethren came out tomorrow and started saying, hey, we should, let men into women's bathrooms at church, and they were like totally cool with that and said men could be women and started confusing gender and all that, yeah, I may stop sustaining them. And I want to tell you this, I'm pretty hardcore about this. If I see a local leader, I think you should stop sustaining them if you find out that they're failing to do their duties. I would stop sustaining a local leader if they began to do things that were seriously contradictory to the brethren. The brethren are where I will leave my standard. But I always judge the mid-level management by the doctrines taught by priesthood leaders, like that marriage is defined by God as a man and a woman, and we cannot change that. I believe the prophet when he says that. So when I see other people out there suggesting otherwise, I got a big problem. And if I saw a local leader doing that, I would have the conversation with them. And if they were kind of like, if I got the impression that they weren't willing to follow the prophet on that, and they started doing things that showed that, I would cease to sustain them, and I would encourage everyone in the congregation to do the same thing. So that's maybe more hardcore than most people would be, but like, if I'm not willing to stand up to the wolves in the sheep's clothing, then we got a real problem. Or then I think we all have that duty to do that. So I use the brethren as the standard, and I judge. I'll sum it up like this.
Yep.
I judge the mid-level management of the church by the brethren. I judge the brethren by the collective witness of God's prophets over time. And I have a whole video series on this that people can go check out. It's a long subject.
I like that. Okay. Moving on to Callan Williams. What are your thoughts on Ezra's eagle prophecy?
Oh my gosh. Here's my thoughts on any of the prophecies of I guess I'll give a little backstory on this. Okay. I come from a family that got really into sort of the overzealousness about the United States of America and its central role in the great plan of salvation.
Okay.
And kind of the Tim Ballard sort of
Sure.
hardcore America prophesying that people make. You know who I follow? I follow President Russell M. Nelson. And the moment that President Russell M. Nelson starts talking about the Ezra's eagle prophecy explicitly, then I will go ahead and endorse it up until the point that the key holder over that says it. I don't believe we all get to interpret the scriptures however the freak we feel like it, because everybody likes to see every secret combination in the Book of Mormon is it's the government this year. They're talking about Hillary Clinton. And it's like maybe in a very general sense, that's true.
Sure.
But when people go overboard into that realm of they begin to make prophecy, you are not a prophet. You are not a prophet over the world. President Nelson is the prophet. Okay. I will follow his prophecies, and his interpretation of the scriptures is the one that is binding on the church and the one who I believe I have the highest level of trust in. Because guess what? Other people have shown themselves way unreliable on their private interpretations of scripture, where they start to go off and figure out whatever the heck they think these prophecies mean. And then within all of a sudden you end up like my grandfather, who goes out and like starts his own church. So it's like,
dang, man, I want a video about that.
Oh man. My grandpa went off the deep end towards the end of his life. It's a sad story of when you begin to prioritize your politics over God's prophets. So don't go down that path. I don't know enough about Ezra's eagle's prophecy specifically to know too much. I just know my prophet is President Russell M. Nelson. I'll follow his lead.
I might be more worried about your football preferences than your politics, but okay. Diamond Dave, too tired for a question. Here is money. Thank you,
Diamond Dave. Thank you, man.
The man. Okay, Zachary Wright says, who are your top 5 favorite LDS apologists?
Ooh,
top 5. Here we go.
Shoot, I got to put Zachary on the top of that now. He's giving me money. I would say nobody influenced me more profoundly than Blake Ostler. Blake is although this is kind of hard because it's sort of like, are we talking apologists or like LDS thinkers? Because I don't know that,
right?
Because he's more of a philosopher and theologian. He does some apologetics though. He does respond to people. So I'll put Blake in there as my number 1.
Okay.
Just a brilliant, brilliant man. I met him in person. We went to lunch. And what I also realized is he's one of those rare individuals who is as good as he is brilliant. He was the way he treated the waiter at the restaurant, and the way I know other people that have met him have talked about just this man. He gets it not only on his intellectual level, but like in his soul. So I can't say enough good things about Blake, and I want everyone to read his stuff because it's just top notch. So Blake, I would say Stephen Smoot.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant guy, is willing to be aggressive. The only thing that holds him back is he's sort of in the academic world, so he has to kind of be careful not to like get too far over his skis. But just does
he do a lot of video or audio stuff? Because I've read his articles, but I don't know that I can't put a face to the name.
I've been encouraging him to do more of that and said, Steven, I want to freaking put your stuff out.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be fun. Cool. Okay.
So Stephen Smoot. I'm gonna say Robert Boylan, because Robert's knowledge is like, I don't know anybody who knows more about the scriptures than that guy.
Yeah.
And not in sort of in a very rigorous academic way. Okay. Absolutely huge fan of his. I will fully admit, though, he has a bit of an Irish temper, and he will throw a punch at people sometimes, maybe not physically, but with words. And so
yeah,
I do not endorse the Irish temper. I just want to put that out there.
I didn't realize that. I'd only watched like other podcasts, and then I watched one like this week, and I was like, oh wow,
Yeah,
like Robert Unleashed.
Yeah,
I miss
Robert
his,
will
I
let
missed
loose
his
and-
background with just stacks of books, though. We need to
Yes.
bring that back. That's amazing.
He is. Now he's back in Ireland. That's what he's
Okay,
doing.
cool. Great.
So I love the guy, but I do caution everyone.
Okay.
He can go a little far. Sometimes he gets angry. Number 4, who would I put on that list? Neil Rapoli. He's the guy who does the Book of Mormon Central stuff and the Scripture Central stuff. Him and his wife. His wife usually does a lot of the short form videos, doing the apologetics there. Really good stuff. He did a response to Trent Horn's like 30th video he's done on the gold.
Okay,
Trying and failing to debunk them. And he's a really solid guy. He helped me with the debate that I had with Trent Horn. Extremely knowledgeable. He's more of a defensive apologist, I think, but you need a good defense. Like I look at him like our middle linebacker on defense.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then I'm probably gonna say the Ward Radio, just the whole crew and the whole. And I put Ward Radio in this. I'd put I kind of put all those guys in that community together, including Stick of Joseph, Greg Mattson, all those guys, in the sense of now what's funny is I would say this, though. I think I'd put them in the number 1 spot for the most effective apologists.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because you're my favorite in the sense that you made a big impact on me sort of intellectually. You know, I'm intellectually minded. So Blake Ostler's kind of like, you're going at the top of my list. But then somebody like Ward Radio and those guys, like they broke ground. Like like the impact that they've had versus somebody like Stephen Smoot, who is brilliant, but he's doing something different. They're operating the world of popular communication.
That's right.
It's a difference between if you're a scholar, that's great. But the scholars, and I tell people this too. Somebody asked me, in fact, it was Brian Hills. He was like, hey, like, I appreciate all that you do. And I was like, hey, Brian, who's on my list of favorite apologists. I said, Brian, you're the one who I appreciate because I'm just going, I don't have like new material really. I have some little bit, but all I do is communicate what you guys have done.
Yeah.
I'm just a bridge between the scholars and the general public.
I think that's really the key, is that it's not, you can't just have good communicators and then no new research and stuff. But the church has been so good at transparency, so good at their new research. Like, we have amazing scholars, and it's a matter of kind of pairing the two.
Yep.
Which Ward Radio does well by bringing on guests, by collaborating. Your channel does well. Yeah, it's a cool format because you're able to bring the Richard Bushmans and the people in to interview and kind of draw them in.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, Professor Chimp, stance on Adam and Eve historicity. Descended from Homo sapiens or purely allegorical, considering gender roles are deeply rooting in evolution psyche?
So, I'm fairly open on this, but my general belief is this, and this is my opinion, and it's nothing exactly directly with the church. I believe that at some point there was a first man and a first woman. I do believe that. Now, does that mean that they were created out of the dust of the earth in one literal day, and it was like God took it and like molded them into a nice little statue, and then he like went and blew on it and boom, and they like came alive? I don't necessarily think that's the case. That's not my best guess as to how it happened. If I were to posit a hypothesis that is maybe the best that I could go with, is that one, I guess it's kind of 2 points. First, because there's a question about the evolutionary theory. I got into the study of evolutionary theory when I was late in high school. My dad had a book that kind of challenged some of the Darwinian assumptions. And I thought it made some interesting arguments that I asked my biology teacher about, and he didn't have good answers for. And so I was kind of like, I'm wondering if everything that everyone tells me in school is totally on the up and up. And it wasn't based on crazy pseudoscientific stuff. Like, these were like legitimate questions about how does this work? And then I dug more into it later, and I dug deep into genetics and how that works, and the neo-Darwinian synthesis. I've gotten into the work of people like Stephen Meyer, who I actually want to get on the show. And what I've come to realize is that, and I think this isn't that controversial to say, is that the mechanisms of neo-Darwinian theory are far more hypothetical when you get into the details than we know how it works. What we know is that when we look at the fossil record, there do seem to be like that species have seem to have connections with one another and those sorts of things. Exactly why and how that all works out, I think, is a big mystery that I think the neo-Darwinian model that tries to explain exactly how that happened. I actually have a video on my channel where it is actually one from years ago, way before I even had this channel, where I made a video where I kind of outlined some of my questions about the way genetics works in an evolutionary sense and information theory. And there's some real questions, okay? And I've never got really great answers out of it. Now, so I have a skepticism about sort of, because people think, oh, evolution, it's a purely naturalistic process. I'm like, I'm not so convinced. This is a weird process. However, was something akin to that a non-random process, a guided process by some sort of a power to bring this about? Even if it was the laws of physics were set up in such a way that it would produce the evolutionary process, like, fine, I could see that. So let's just say that something like a guided evolutionary process happens that is designed. And so this process kicks off and it creates different biological systems and and animals and all this stuff. And eventually human souls, like the souls of the divine,
Sure.
are placed into these animals. And there's the first two, a man and a woman, right? Is this a possible scenario? Yes. The stories that we have are far later retellings,
Right.
mythologized histories of what had happened in eras past. Okay.
Right.
Now, again, this is just my model. Now, I do think it is fascinating that it was about 6,000 years ago. If you go back 10,000 years ago, there's like nothing. It's like human beings aren't really, they're acting almost like animals. There's not much difference. And then all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, 6,000 years in the history of the world, in the history of biological life, is nothing. It is literally like, boop, and all of a sudden we're whizzing around in space and friggin' talking to each other on computers like this. Like, what the freak? In fact, 200 years ago, we were still like worrying about farming enough food to make it.
Right.
So the fact that, like, human beings are weird. People who act like human beings are just another animal. It's like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because we have things like cats in the evolutionary history of the world, saber-tooths and all this other kind of stuff. We have stuff like whales. We have stuff like fish and mollusks. Do we have anything like us? People will say, well, maybe biologically, fine. I don't have a problem with that. Do we have something that built a toilet? like a ceramic toilet, the thing you just have in your house. You don't think anything of that is a freaking miracle. If we found a fossil of a toilet, we would like our minds would be blown forever. We are the weirdest thing that has ever existed in the universe ever that we've ever have any record of. And so I can't help. And it's weird because that also did seem to kick off about like 6,000 years ago.
Sure.
All of a sudden we started being really unlike other animals. And so my model is that I believe it is based in history, but I do not believe that the story is even meant to be a literal telling of the events.
The way my favorite scholar on this is Bruce Porter, and his emphasis, he'll talk about how the way we know truth is things as they are, past, present, and future, and we have different tellings of the Adam and Eve story in that. Go watch his stuff on that, but it all emphasizes the relationship between us and God, and it's the greatest way for us to understand our relationship between us and God. Whether it's 100% historical or not, that's besides the point. Like, how am I in relation to God? That's the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
agreed.
Cool. Okay, Jeff Clausen, how I see open theism: God knows all possible states and their probabilities, but is an infinitely resourceful chess player that can act in all states.
Fair enough. I don't have any problem with that. I think that's a very fair way of putting it.
Cool. Ivy Joker, thank you for the super chat.
Thank you.
And Collab Society, how does God show the future if he doesn't know it? Oh, that's a good one.
You're
like
right.
that.
And this is Hayden. So Hayden and I, by the way,
Hayden is the Collab Society.
Yeah, I want Hayden and I to I actually want to do like a friendly debate on this topic.
Okay.
And see if we can convince the audience. I would say that I can show you the future in the same way I can show you that, hey, I can show you a vision of my child eating a cupcake as a state of affairs that is very, 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 very likely to come about.
Okay.
And I could prophesy it. I could even make a video of him eating a cupcake to show like, hey, this is what it's going to be. I could show it to you. And then he does it. And it could be like, I'm a prophet. But it doesn't necessarily mean that event was certainly fixed into the future. So I would say that God is showing a state of affairs that will come about if certain conditions are met. That's what I believe he's showing. I don't believe he's actually showing the actual events that actually happened, because that would to say that those events could not be otherwise. And I just don't think it's possible to do that logically. God can do all that which is logically possible to do. And so then the only question is it logically possible for any being in any possible world to be able to know future events outright if the future is not in fact fixed?
I want formal debate, you and Hayden, on this.
I'm down.
I think it would be so, because we've seen you on the same team so many times.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
And frankly, Hayden and I, it'd be a very friendly debate.
Yeah, that's great. Real quick, Luke Hansen says, I agree with you on the Ward Radio critique. Luke, I'm glad you're a part of the team. Level-headed Luke, I think, is your nickname. You earned it for a reason.
Cool-headed Luke. I think it's
is it cool-headed Luke? Cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Here's the thing that's great about Word Radio, though, is it allows for differences of opinion, and it allows for Luke to be on there disagreeing with Brad, disagreeing with Card, and disagreeing with everybody, and yet they're doing amazing work. I see the comments that come in through Instagram, or the direct messages that you get, right, on your Thoughtful Faith Instagram, and the amount of people who say, hey, you and Ward Radio and these other guys help me come back to church, or hey, I'm getting baptized, or like these messages that are coming in. You really, when you see that in the back end and you're starting to actually get these, it opens your eyes to the work that's actually being done.
It's been the thing that has made me go, oh, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And we need to double down and triple down, because this is helping people.
Right.
And it's wild when it happens.
Right. Cool. You got $249, but I think that's Mexican
Uriel
pesos. What is
Hernandez.
that?
Thank you. Gracias, amigo. Gracias.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Here we go. Professor Chimp, where's the line between government intervention and persuasion? Least serious crime that warrants force. Stance on alcohol prohibition, given the awful damage from alcoholism, drunk driving, etc. That
I
hits.
love this. I love this question. So first of all, I want to kind of preface this that Latter-day Saints need to realize government questions are questions about the use of violent force. Remember, we're not passing suggestions. We're passing laws. And if you don't obey the law, someone with a gun will show up at your house and take you away and put you in a cage if you don't obey the law, ultimately. All law is force. So the question is as Latter-day Saints, what are we comfortable with forcing people to do, even if necessary at the point of a gun? Okay? Now, nice little Latter-day Saints, little suburbanites that are just, just casseroles and happiness. We don't often think about that. But the reality is that the world is held together by violent force. That's the reason the barbarians aren't at the gates. That's what all civilized societies have had to do. They got together and they made laws that said, we're in this geographical region, there are certain rules that you're going to abide, or else we will smack you upside the head. Now, the wonderful thing about the United States of America is that I think we came up with a wonderful system that says, hey, it's kind of messed up when people have the power to smack everybody around. So why don't we make that as small as possible and have people be as virtuous as possible and choose to coordinate and live with one another in harmony to the greatest degree possible so that we can make this government as small as possible. We can use the gun as little as possible. That's the hope, that people will voluntarily cooperate with one another so that we don't have to use the point of a gun to make people do stuff. Okay? So, but then there's the question he brought up perfectly, but where's that line? And it depends. I think that that's the whole point of the democratic system. The democratic system, or we have a republic. We don't have a democracy. We have a democratic republic that through democratic means chooses people that we believe are the wisest among us, hopefully, to be able to make decisions on our behalf, which is much better than a pure mobocracy. And that system is meant to allow us to figure out when should we use force, right? For me, the litmus test is this. If I'm not willing to use violent force to do it myself, then I'm not going to empower my agent of the state to do it. Would I point a gun at someone because they were drinking a beer? No. Would I point a gun at someone to tell them to get out of their car because they're about to drive away while they're drunk? Yes, I would. I would do that. I would pull out my gun and I would point it at them and I would say, you get out of that car. You are putting the lives of innocent children at risk with that. Okay. Now, people may have different opinions on that. That's the whole democratic process. My whole thing is that I hope we all realize this. The whole question of government is, who are we going to point the gun at? That's it. We're making laws. The laws decide who gets the gun pointed at them under what circumstances. It's that simple. And so when you think of it like that, all of a sudden you go, I wouldn't point my gun at someone to make them donate to make sure everyone in my town has a cell phone. You know what I mean? Like, I would ask people to, but I wouldn't point a gun at them. And I think that's the way people need to think about legislation. Legislation is just saying who you're going to point the gun at under what conditions. And so if you're not comfortable pointing your gun at someone, then why in the heck are you voting for someone or some law that does give people that authorizes people to do that on your behalf as your representative? So that's kind of the thinking that I go about with it.
Sure.
So
awesome. Okay, thanks for that. Michael William Zitar asks.
Michael, he's one of my favorites on my Facebook page. So thanks for super chat, Michael.
Cool. Will you try to get more LDS academic types interviewed or presenting on your channel in the future? Guys like Carrie Mulstein and the like. Give them a chance to further present and hash out their work with you querying.
Yes, on both accounts. It's just a matter of who and what the topic would be. That's really the key. There are a lot of sort of academic topics that frankly are just kind of boring to the audience.
Right.
And so it's sort of like, okay, it's all about the angle that we are, whether people like it or not. Like if you want a really deeply academic channel, you're going to get like 30 people to watch it.
Yeah, sure.
And so in my mind, it's all about finding where these people either debunk popular voices that are out there. Because that's the thing I look at when I'm thinking about content I'm looking at like and I think, Austin, you've been great about this. Who's actually making an impact out there?
What's effective? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if Alyssa Grenfell has 12 million views in the last month, I think that's how many she has. Yeah, maybe we should address that. And maybe all of our scholars should be making videos debunking everything that she says. Yeah. Instead of making a video about some topic nobody cares about that like 30 people read about. Like, are we actually engaged in the battle? But scholars, to a certain extent, they aren't. They have their little area that they focus on hypersensitively. And I think that bridging that gap is something that I try to do. But again, I'm not going to go up with somebody's pet theory about Kolob when it's like nobody cares about that when people are leaving the church because of whatever social issues on people's mind.
Dude, if every article that came out from FAIR was just targeted at like one anti for like just 3 months, give it 3 months, career over. You know what I'm saying? Like,
do it.
Just because they're brilliant.
They would get if you just had a collection of scholars just torching her to the ground on every dumb thing she said.
Yeah.
The thing is, the list you could make of false things that she demonstrably false things that Alyssa Grenfell has said,
that her worldview has. You could, the list could go on. All the things you could.
But it's like, oh, but that gets kind of mean when you talk about specific people. You don't want to actually talk about Sherem.
Sure. Then you turn out like Jacob.
What was that?
Then you'll turn out like Jacob.
Exactly. And Jacob's just a big meanie who actually doesn't just like, I'm not just passive aggressive, which is kind of the Latter-day Saint thing to do. Let's just be really passive aggressive. We'll never talk about the actual person that is actually causing the problem because that might get ooh. And it's like, no, you guys should just go here. Let me give you an example of someone who's totally wrong on this issue. You don't have to make it personal, go after them personally, but at least give the specific examples. So anyway.
Right.
People are afraid of that.
Okay. Uriel actually sent a question with his super chat. So cheers from Mexico. What practical steps and resources, books, podcasts would you recommend to deepen my understanding about reality, God, and Christ, and communicate these ideas better?
Dang, I get this question so much. I really need to make that video.
You need a do you have a list on your website of like books, resources, like the Jordan Peterson, like read this if you're interested?
I need to drop that on there. It's funny. I'm right now, I'm going to pull up on my phone. I have a note where I wrote all that down.
Okay.
Let me see here. My list. I actually want to go through it real quick.
I'll keep
here. Okay. So here's
get that up. That's
level 1 conversation. And I will put these on the website. I'll just go through them quick. So this is the nature of reality. Who do I suggest? Jordan Peterson, William Lane Craig, John Lennox, Carl Jung, Thomas Aquinas, Blaise Pascal, Alvin Plantinga, Stephen Meyer, William Dembski. That's a huge one. I love William. Jonathan Pageau, Frank Turek, and Greg Bonson. Okay. That's kind of your basic belief in God. For a level 2 conversation, more about sort of the nature of Christianity, C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, George MacDonald, N.T. Wright, Bishop Robert Barron, and the historian Tom Holland is excellent. And then on sort of the level 3 conversation, we're getting more into restoration type topics. Hugh Nibley, Blake Ostler, Terrell Givens, Robert Boylan, Brant Gardner, Fair LDS, Evidence Central, the LDS Truth Claim series by Brett McDonald. And then I did put my post on epistemology.
Okay.
So I'll get more of that up on the website. But yeah, I have a lot that I would suggest. And all those people have tons of stuff out there, but those have all had pretty big impact on me.
Like that. Okay, one more screen share here, real quick.
Okay.
So, and I'm kind of pitching you on this. I've been thinking for a while. Have you seen the media bias charts like this?
Oh yeah.
Where they'll throw this up and you know, up here you got Pew Research and it's like, okay, they do great stuff and it's unbiased. And then down here you've got stuff, okay, on the right you got Ben Shapiro and apparently it's less newsworthy and more like, I don't know what the chart is, but whatever. These media bias charts where they try to map where everything is. I've been thinking for a while, we need one of these for Latter-day Saint channels.
Yeah, we
Like
do.
badly, because you'll listen to something like Faith Matters and you're like, oh, Faith Matters, great. But like they teach some stuff that's just wild, or they have guests on that it's like, this is not Faith Matters, this is Doubt Matters. This is definitely not helpful to people.
Yes.
And it causes a huge crisis. And my family is hit hard by this. They love Faith Matters. And it's like they got some weird ideas that are causing lots of faith crisis.
I
Right?
always say it's a birthday cake with glass in it.
Totally. We need something like this. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while. We need a media bias chart for Latter-day Saint channels. And I think we should put it on your website.
We should put it on our
I think
website.
it'd
We
be
should,
fun.
we should do a whole episode on it. So if you put it together, we will do an episode on it. We will put it on there and we can
I'll
talk
put
about
together the list, but I don't know. And then we'll chart it. We'll
that.
chart
Yeah.
it live.
That's
Oh
fine.
yeah.
We can chart it
Like
live
tier
or
ranking.
whatever you want. We can and we can try and get people from different perspectives maybe on it. So that
Yeah.
way it isn't just like me and you making the chart. It's kind of like
Yeah, it'll be a
get
biased
someone
media
who's a little
bias
bit
chart.
more. Maybe get Kwaku in here. He's a little more like left leaning, as it were, a little more progressive in his mindset.
That'd be fun.
That could be a fun
That'd be
one.
fun.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
we'll have to get a diverse
that.
group.
All right, now we're going here. I think we're at S. Leota again. Thank you. Is now a day abortion just a sneakier? Oh, is nowadays abortion just a sneakier reenactment to what the Pharaoh did to the Hebrew firstborn right before us?
It is actually terrible when you actually study the statistics. So Margaret Sanger is sort of the mind child behind Planned Parenthood's vision of exterminating the weeds from among us. She was a horrible racist who wanted to purify the country by basically having Black people and other inferior races have less babies. That was her theory. Okay. And guess what? Guess what groups have the most abortions? Per capita, it's the minority communities. And what she proposed is actually what is happening. Margaret Sanger, the horrible racist eugenicist, could not be happier with what abortion is doing. So, yeah, it's horrible and insidious and satanic in a real way. I don't worry about Halloween as much as I worry about voting for people who literally do not recognize the humanity of a baby at any point during pregnancy. Zero. Like there is no restriction at any point that that Harris has proposed. And I'm sorry, and that's going to follow into policy. Any of Donald Trump's personal failings, they're personal failings, but that sort of a mentality that gets pushed into actual public policy. So it's a horrible thing. But thank you, S. Leota, for bringing that up. It's an issue we need to talk a lot about because a lot of, especially younger Latter-day Saints, just don't get it.
Right on. Okay, we're a little behind here. Let's see what we can do. LDS Gnosis asks, thoughts on Europa, the final battle Mormon scene?
Oh wait, hold on. I'm not seeing that one. Are we sure don't have Kaylin Williams first?
I thought we just did. Oh, no, sorry. My bad. We did S. Leota. Okay, Kaylin Williams, speaking of prophets and apostles, do you still believe that the Fan Proc should not be canonized due to Heavenly Mother and a lack of scriptural support?
So people might find I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings on it. I did come out with a Facebook post one day when I was feeling a little bit more ornery on the subject.
Okay.
So to be consistent with my collective witness model, I don't think it's inconsistent to say that we have a Heavenly Mother, but the actual canonized scripture don't talk about her at all. There's nothing in there really. There are some potential allusions to it, but it's very lightly supported collective witness wise. It's a doctrine that largely emerged, like go prior to Let's say
Sure.
go prior to 1840.
Sure.
Anywhere. Is there any mention of Heavenly Mother even in Mormonism or outside of Mormonism anywhere? Like,
Right. Yeah. No.
not really.
No.
You could make the case that they're Asherah worship and some of that. I think
Okay.
that strengthens the case. It starts to make the case that there is something more to it. And I do think that there might be something to that. So what I say is on the sort of collective witness sort of in ecclesiastical terms as
Right.
to what's authoritative within the church, I have to say that the modern prophets hold it 100%. So it is the doctrine of the church that we have a Heavenly Mother. That is our official doctrine. Is that doctrine sure and true? I tend to say, I believe it is. I trust the prophet. I'm going to go with them on it. But I have to admit that it's a weaker doctrine than maybe others. Now, with that in mind, I think there's good logical reasons to believe it. I do believe it.
Yeah.
I believe we have a Heavenly Mother.
You
But
just like causing trouble.
I
In
kind of
the
causing
Facebook
trouble.
forums.
Cause a little trouble. And it's one of those ones that I just have to admit it doesn't have as strong of a collective witness over time as other doctrines do. And so I'm
Sure.
willing to, and so I could see why I'd be a
Is
little
that a weakness of the Heavenly Mother doctrine, or is that a weakness in the collective witness model? Or is it both?
I would say it's a weakness in the model is the way you determine what is doctrinal. So I don't think it's a
Sure.
weakness in the model. It's a weakness. I think that there's been many things that haven't been like the theories that the church now disavows about the reasons for the priesthood ban. The church disavows those. Those were proclaimed as doctrine,
Sure.
and they were taught as doctrine by the church.
Sure.
Officially, in official over the pulpits, in official declarations, up and down, left and right. It was there. And you know the whole reason that you can be totally confident in saying that, but it never had a good collective witness support, ever. Because the scriptures don't support a sub-Saharan ban on Africans. It doesn't at all. So my reason for rejecting the priesthood, the reasons behind the priesthood ban are that they didn't ever line up with the collective witness. And so I think people should have been cautious about them from the beginning. Now, I don't hold that same thing with Heavenly Mother. I actually think
Sure.
there are hints to that it may have been something anciently held. And it makes logical sense. There's a very good logical case for it. And obviously it's been the doctrine of the church since at least the King Follett time, roughly. That's kind of a disputed thing. But anyway, I do I still believe that it should not be canonized? I wouldn't care either way. If it was or if it wasn't, I can understand both sides.
This surprises me. I like this. Okay, cool. Thoughts on Europa Final Battle Mormon scene from LDS Gnosis?
Thoughts on Europa, the final battle scene?
Might be Europe. I don't know.
I don't know what this is. Sorry, LDS Gnosis. I can't give thoughts on this because
I'll have to go figure it out.
I don't know what that is. So thank you for the super chat, though. Appreciate it.
Hellfire Agency asks, how are atheists, agnostics leaving the church harming their Mormon family members? Shouldn't families support each other in honest pursuit of truth?
How are they harming their Mormon family members? Well, okay. The first thing to recognize is anytime a relationship, like what builds a relationship between people? Well, one thing is going to be common values. I have, for instance, atheist siblings who I'm very, very close with. I would say we have a very high level terrestrial relationship. I know, and guess what? In the terrestrial kingdom, like it's great, like it's a wonderful place. But could it be more? It isn't necessarily that you're actively causing harm, though that does happen sometimes.
Sure.
It's that you're falling short of a potential that you could have in a and what I mean by that is that my brothers and I, yes, our relationship is great, but if my brothers and I were Latter-day Saints together and we were working together in the cause of Zion with full understanding of what that meant, our relationship would be even deeper than it is. And it's good now. I don't know, not crapping on it.
Yeah.
But it'd go to a celestial level. That's the kind of relationship God wants us to have. John 17, he said, he didn't say he wants the disciples just to be like buddies with each other. He said, I want you guys to be one in the way that I and the Father are one. So what Hellfire Agency probably doesn't understand, what a lot of people don't understand, we're not going for good enough. The church is the club of people who are trying to go to the celestial kingdom. In other words, we're the people that will go as far as God will take us, and we'll do anything to get there. And so I will maximize my relationship with everyone that I can to the farthest point that I can. But the reality is that as people embrace things that are not true, it will create a gulf between us that can't be bridged until we all come to an arrival at the truth. And when we find out that the truth is embodied in the person of Jesus Christ, and that we put all our faith and trust in him, then they just can't go to their highest potential. And that hurts me. It always will, because it's like, I wish we could have that. Right. So you don't live on an island. We all are interconnected, especially with the people who we love most in our families, the people that are closest to us. And so, but how should we react to that as Latter-day Saints? Well, don't make it worse, idiots. Like, don't go and like ruin your relationship with your agnostic or atheist family member. If ever there's a time to put your arm around them and make sure they know that you are there for them, but you don't compromise. You also don't compromise your own beliefs. So I think his question almost assumes that we have a policy of like, shun all your family members and hate them if you have a difference of belief. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Right.
So,
it's limited in. Yeah. You said it well. We got to catch up here. Okay. Zach Doomit says,
how's it going, man?
Why do you think it is that the top church leadership is not sufficiently educated on our theology, especially given that it's the religion's greatest strength? You can't teach what you don't know.
I think a lot of our top leaders are they're probably more than a lot of people realize. They're not out there to be theologians. That's not the purpose of them. And as anyone who served a mission knows, if you go in to somebody and you got some investigator and you start getting into Christological problems and the Trinity, they're just going to look at you cross-eyed. I remember going on my mission thinking like, I'm going to use all these like arguments to like show people why we're right. And I realized that doesn't work. Okay. The brethren aren't theologians. They're not scholars. They're not apologists. They're ministers. Their job is to proclaim Jesus Christ and to build his kingdom by inviting people to make and keep covenants with the Savior. That's what they're about. Now, there's a degree of theology that's required for that they're going to go about pursuing. And your bishop isn't going to be a theologian. Who was it? Jeff McCullough, bless his heart. Love that guy. He recently said something brilliant to the evangelicals that like to Bible bash with the missionaries. He said, you guys are all wrong. These young men are not apologists. They're more like tour guides. And I was like, it's a perfect analogy. If I go to some tour I'm on, I'm not going to start arguing with the tour guide and think I'm some big tough guy because like I knew more than the tour guide that was leading me on the tour. You expect them to know some things, but it's like, they're not a deep expert. They're just the guy they hired to take you through the tour and like tell you about the things that are there. They know their little things they know. And that's what missionaries are supposed to do. They take you on a tour of the faith and say, if this is for you, we'd love you to be a part of this. If you want to engage with an apologist, then find an apologist. And the thing is that the brethren are not apologists. They're not theologians. They are called to lead the church. And I think of church leaders, they're less like the great theologian and they're more like the guy who shows up to your house every time they need someone to help with the move. They're the first guy to raise their hand. They're the ones who are really willing to serve and that love other people. That is what church leaders need to be about, because ultimately it's the experience with those kind of people that really impacts people more than their arguments for the vast majority of people. The Spirit is what converts. And we do need to bring our minds to the table. I think we have brilliant leaders in the church that are truly intellectually like really sharp people. But that is not the highest purpose of the church, and therefore the highest leaders don't have that responsibility.
Right. Okay, Patty Smith here. Also, what's our cutoff? How we doing?
I'm trying to go as much as 2 hours if you're good with it, but
yeah,
I mean, if
I'm
we
good.
get,
I just want to let super chats know, how much time we have.
I would say we're gonna try and go for between. I would say let's try and get somewhere between an hour 35 and an hour 45 would be ideal, but we can go as long as 2 hours if we have a whole bunch come in. So try and get those in soon.
Okay. Which period? This is Patty Smith. Thank you. Which period of time is 3rd Nephi 16:10 referred to? The Gentiles shall sin against my gospel and reject the fullness of my gospel. It ends with, I will bring the fullness of my gospel from among them.
I don't know. I'd have to look up the reference. Just dropping that reference on me that quickly. I'm sorry, Patty. That one's just one that without having more context and stuff and being able to go into it all right now, I don't have every part of the scriptures committed to memory to the point that I can tell you exactly what it's referring to. And ultimately, this is one thing though, just on the nature of interpreting scriptures. I will always defer to the brethren on what they think this refers to rather than my own private interpretation. Okay. They are the key holders. And once I acknowledge them as such, that includes the authoritative interpretation of scripture that's binding on the members of the church. And if if my interpretation is different, I might think they're wrong, but I'd be very cautious about going and telling people what my interpretation is if it contradicts what the brethren teach on the subject, because as the key holders, they are the ones who give the authoritative interpretation of scripture and prophecy.
Cool. You've had like 3 people in the comments talk about how it's Sunday. They don't want to spend money. And how are you making money on Sunday?
Well, you're giving to charity because I don't keep any of the money for myself. All of the funds that come into Thoughtful Faith, just so everyone knows, I don't take a penny of it for myself. It all goes directly to channel expenses. I support myself through my own private businesses that I'm associated with, and I don't necessarily have an issue with people donating to help support certain channels and things like that, but that's not the case with me so far, and I don't anticipate that needing to be the case. I do this entirely 100% because I believe in the cause, because of those comments from people who actually get helped by things that are being put out, and because if our enemies are going to go and lie about us publicly, we need to be able to respond to it.
Cool. I like how you clarify that you think it's okay to. I know True Millennial, one of my favorite channels. They're pretty awesome, but the dude's freaking loaded. He's just got millions. And so when he's like, I don't turn on ads because I don't want people to think I'm making money. Well, okay, great. But like, okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high bar. So
yeah, no, I don't necessarily have a problem with it as long as my only thing is this. Where I do get a little bit of like priestcrafty with people is if you're putting your testimony behind a paywall,
right?
That's a problem in my mind. It's not like, hey, come and listen to my dissertation on XYZ, but only for those who pay. It's kind of like, dude, you're not putting your best out there to the world free of charge. Like, I'm here to spread light in the gospel to the world. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. So, and I get it. People need to make money, but I think that
certain business models are more priestcrafty than others.
Well, I look at it very much like the early missionaries. The early missionaries, when they weren't able to be supported, how did they support themselves? They went out without purse or script, and people gave them money so that they could buy their food and live their life. I don't have a problem with people doing that. And if you have a really effective missionary and people are giving him that so that they can continue to do what they do, that's fine. But I would want it to be voluntarily giving and not saying, hey, you're only going to get my testimony if you pay me for it. I'm not okay with that.
Awesome. Okay, this one we'll keep quick because you've just done a few videos on it. Kevin Nelson, how toxic is modern feminism on the female psyche?
Oh, yeah, you're right. We go all day on that. I think I'll make a quick comment on it though with this. There's a difference between, like, people don't realize, like, one of the first things I asked them, someone's like, well, you don't like feminism? I'm like, well, which wave? Because if you're just talking about like equal rights, like that women can vote, like, yeah, I'm in favor of that. You're calling that feminism? Like, have you not been around since 1960? Like, do you know nothing about second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism? And you say that and they look at you like, what are you talking about? It's like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Okay. Feminism, as it's gone on, has just turned into an absolute insane group of man-hating psychopathy, based in radical feminist theory that basically tells women to be more like men, and that if they're not more like men, that they suck. And now fourth wave, I mean, dudes can be women. So
Yeah.
I don't even know what it is anymore.
Is there an alternative word you can give people? Because, like, you know, when I explain my views on feminism, sometimes people think I'm like anti-woman, anti-rights, right? And it's like, that's no, like, feminism is a bad word because feminism is a bad word. It's not because of the woman element. Is there another term for this? Is it like suffrage? Do we go back to suffrage? We were all for that. Like,
I think we need to be what we need to do is we need to get clear about what we're talking about. There are these isms people drop, and it's like, well, what are you talking about specifically?
Right.
Jordan Peterson has his great rule: don't hide things in the fog.
Right.
The word feminism is just a fog. What you think it means, what they think it means, it's like, the first thing is just say, let's figure out what we're even talking about here. Like, what do you think I'm against?
Right.
You're against women being able to vote. It's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, right.
Well, you're against women being able to work.
Right.
No, I'm not. Well, you think that men and women have some sort of biological differences. And I go, yeah, because they do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't, and then you can have a nuanced and
Yeah,
interesting
then you can
conversation
actually-
about what these things mean. So the problem is that feminism becomes this fog that people get put into, and then they say, well, you're not a feminist if you don't accept XYZ insanity. I'm like, well, I'm a feminist, so I guess I got it. It's like, it's all just a stupid game. Just get into the specifics of what do you believe, what don't you believe, and why.
Sure.
So, and it is modern feminism. Basically, it's horrible for women because it basically tells them to hate their femininity, to constantly want to compete with men. It devalues family. It devalues sexual control over oneself and the nature of sexual difference between men and women. It hurts women, and it gets them to think less about bearing children as a path to real fulfillment, when ultimately, like, that is the thing that brings both men and women, by the way, their deepest fulfillment in their life. And so, and a lot of times women find out later in life that, oh my gosh, like, I want to have a baby. And then they're like in a rush and they got to find some man, they find some loser. And it's like, anyway, it's horrible. If you don't put your first and foremost responsibility, whether you are a guy or a girl, when you are in your 20s, the most important decision you will make is who you marry.
Right.
I didn't choose my college based on career considerations. I chose it based on the fact that there were good women around that have my values, that I could probably have a high likelihood of finding someone to start a life. And people who are like, oh, you go to college, you get married. It's like, yeah. What's implicit in that stupid comment? And sorry if I'm rambling a little here.
No.
What's implicit in that stupid comment is that career matters more than marriage. Are you kidding me? I know a lot of people who have a crap ton of money and a crappy marriage, and their life sucks. And I know people who struggle financially, but have a good marriage. And guess what? Those people, they are doing all right. So people are all freaking mixed up when family isn't first.
That was a Jordan Peterson rant.
Yeah.
I like it. You like transformed into the visage of. All right. Gage Shimabek, or whatever. Shimabek. I'm sorry because I brought it up with non-super chats, but I should have waited for this one. Is donating a super chat or accepting a super chat on the Sabbath day, breaking the Sabbath day? Loved what you had to say on the prophets and keeping what the brethren say versus the business entity of the church. I say if he's sending $20, his sins are forgiven. What do you say?
That is right. We are selling indulgences online. No, you're donating. You are donating to a charity, and all will be used to further the cause of Zion. And with the brethren and the business entity of the church, one thing, just an interesting priestcraft note here. I actually, and I will say this publicly, I think the brethren, all of the general authorities, they should increase their stipend considering the inflation situation in our country. And I am 100% for that. Because one of the things also people don't realize when they think that that's some form of priestcraft, do you realize how much secular management they have to do? Do you know how much you'd get paid just to be on the board of regents of a major university? That alone is like way bigger than the stipend these guys get. And then you throw on top of that all the other things, massive logistical operations that you have to oversee, massive real estate holdings that you manage, massive financial things that you manage. You do realize the church isn't just giving talks in general conference. Like these guys, at the general level, these guys are managing not only the spiritual affairs of the church, but the temporal affairs at all, and they give themselves entirely to it. Okay? And the fact that everyone should know this, the highest paid church employee, according to D. Michael Quinn, who was excommunicated from the church, did a bunch of research on this and said it was the most faith-promoting thing he discovered was the church's management and finances. And he said this. He said the highest paid employee in the church makes significantly more than the president of the church itself. And you know who cuts that check? It's the president of the church. So why would, if the president of the church was after money, why would he be taking such a small cut? Especially when considering what the and also doesn't take more than the other general authorities do.
Sure.
So yeah, it's not the case. So anyway, I just want to go off on that for a second.
It's wild
it's
hearing his research on like comparing the church to, say, Red Cross. Just that comparison alone, and you're like, what is with these people who spend their lives devoted to tearing down an evil, terrible organization, and then they love the Red Cross? Like, okay, there's something wrong here, but
it's insane.
Great research though. Okay, the Stick of Joseph asks, when are you going to debate Michelle Stone with a live audience in Utah? Wink. Have they offered to host this event?
Yeah, I think okay. They're already offering it. All right, so I am in very serious consideration. I don't know if she will take me up on it though, honestly.
Oh, okay.
But I'm kind of considering if I want to do it or not. But I'm pretty sure I want to. It's pretty likely, I would say. I'd say more likely than not.
So that's changed though, because a minute ago you were hesitant for several reasons. It made total sense, but so what's changed?
I just had a lot of people that are saying you ought to do it, and I feel like the issue kind of still seems relevant. I think there's a lot of people like I did a debate on the subject, but we'd have to modify the debate a little bit.
Sure.
And that's part of the reason I'm trying to figure this out. It's like, what would I actually want to debate? Because I don't want to debate the exact same topic I did before.
Sure.
But I would say that the reason I'm reconsidering it too is just it continues to go on. Michelle is the person that's kind of the loudest voice in that space. So It's like, look, I didn't really have the debate with the loudest voice. And so maybe I should actually have the debate with the loudest voice to kind of put this to rest.
Do you know, has she ever done a formal debate?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. So,
Right on.
because
she's pushing for it, right?
I don't know that she has been. It was funny.
Really?
I actually challenged her. Somebody made me mad in a comment one time, so I did. I was just like, Michelle, okay, that's fine. Let's do a debate. You in? And I tagged her, but she didn't
Really?
respond.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was like a
Okay.
few weeks ago. But I'm just kind of like on the fence. I got to figure out when I would do it exactly and how it would all work and what the exact topic would be. And I actually would really like to do a 2-on-2 debate if we did it.
Those are fun. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, and then she wouldn't have to feel like she's alone. I wouldn't feel like I'm alone, and we could have us two, and then maybe each of us with like a scholar in our back pocket next to us to kind of help us.
Then you wrestle afterwards, right? I'm just messing.
Although I do want to do a rematch with Jacob Isbell. I do want to do that, and I may lose again. Jacob Isbell is a strong, good wrestler.
But I kind of hope you lose. I think it'd be good for you.
So.
All right. Kyle says, sometimes someone asks a question in church. I can tell based on anti-content and I have a decent answer, but I don't want to open a can of worms for people unfamiliar with the topic. Any advice? I think I read that wrong, but you get the picture.
Yeah. So church is a very interesting place. You have to be careful with it. I do even. Primarily because I don't see the purpose of your Sunday school or your Relief Society. It's the primary purpose of it is not apologetics. The primary purpose of Relief Society and Sunday school and stuff like that, or Elders Quorum, is spiritual experience, worship, and testimony. That's what the meetings are designed for. Okay. We have forums like this that you can spend countless hours in. I mean, we're already going to spend as much time on this show as we did in church today. There are forums out there for apologetics. I just don't see that as it. So I'm not saying don't ever sort of push back on false ideas, but let the Spirit kind of be your guide and don't rob from the spirit of a meeting.
Right.
Unnecessarily. You want to keep the Spirit as much as possible.
Cool. Okay, Jethro says Latter-day Saints and Trinitarians largely agree about who Jesus is, just not about what God is. Assuming they're right, how would misbelief in what God is affect the ability or willingness to save?
So it's funny. This is one of the primary differences between just the way that Latter-day Saints think about things and the way that creedal Christians do. And frankly, it's probably one of the main reasons I'm a Latter-day Saint. We don't really care that much about your theology. There is a level to it that's important, but it's pretty low bar. What we care about is, are you making and keeping covenants? Like that to us is like, that shows that you have faith in the Savior. It's not just lip service, like, oh, this is what I believe, but it's like you are manifesting through your life that is what you believe, that you really do trust in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. What all your conceptions are about exactly how everything works in to Latter-day Saints, like, you could be totally wrong. We don't care. Like, we care that you have genuine faith in the Savior, right? Not that your theology is right. It's a matter of faith, not a matter of theology. In other churches, it's literally like, if you don't believe in the right Jesus, which is another way of saying, if your theology isn't good, isn't right, it doesn't matter all the other stuff in your life that you're doing. It's a theology test. It's like, wait a minute, life is a theology test? It's like, yeah, you can live however the freak you want, basically. If on your deathbed, you're like, Jesus is Lord and the Trinitarian conception. It's like, off you go to heaven forever. But that Jew who was just a great dude, but never cried, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, like, to hell with them. It's, and I know that there's more nuance to that sort of argument, but there is a binary between, well, what is it? Is it theology that ultimately matters, or is it how you live? And if it's how you live, I'm sorry, but when people make and keep the covenants of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, seems pretty good. it seems like it really works well. And they seem to live very Christian lives. And if God is going to send all those people to hell just because they're theologically like, well, it wasn't actually, 3, it was 1. And you said 3, the answer was 1. So fail to hell forever and torture and damnation. It's like, it just doesn't, I don't know. I just think that soteriology, the study of salvation, and that whole can of worms, we are so head and shoulders above others. It is the thing that the restored gospel just does better than any other Christian group out there. It's really remarkable. And frankly, I've seen a lot of people be brought to the church over that issue. They believe in Jesus Christ, but they just can't get on board with these other conceptions of salvation that would damn good people to eternal torment. So that's that.
Okay. A yak named Max says, how do you tell if someone is a false prophet? I see a lot of LDS adjacent people who essentially claiming to be prophets, and it seems to be getting worse.
Well, first and foremost, by their fruits ye shall know them. That's what Jesus Christ said. For me, it is what comes out of them in terms of, do they bring people closer to Jesus Christ as manifest in the collective witness of God's prophets that I do trust? So I believe Peter, James, and John and the books of the New Testament talk about, I believe they're authoritatively binding, that they're prophetic books. I see the Old Testament in kind of the same way. For Latter-day Saint, you believe the Book of Mormon and those prophets. So who is it that's following in those people's, who is it that's pointing people towards that Christ? Okay, that's the first kind of bar to thing. They also need to have, if we're climbing it in a more specific sense, a key holder. They need to have some legitimate claim to the keys, right? Like, if you don't have a legitimate claim to keys, like if Austin here all of a sudden is telling me he's a prophet, I'd be like, okay, so tell me how you got the keys of the kingdom. How'd that happen? Because Jesus gave them to his apostles. And did he show up and give you keys? Right. And so, and it's one of the first things that you can test with people is when you start to ask them about keys, especially with a lot of the quote unquote LDS adjacent, sort of the polygamy denier camps, the snufferites, all those kind of people. You ask them about the keys and they start going, well, keys. They're sort of this more esoteric sort of thing that we think about. And it's not really it isn't a key so much as a key. And so they have this entirely different idea about keys. And usually when someone isn't clear on what the keys of the kingdom are, I kind of just throw it out the window. It's like, nah, the keys were the authority given by Jesus Christ to bind on earth and in heaven. And if you don't have that authority from him, I have no interest in you. Like you get disqualified from round 1.
Right. That's okay. We'll move on, but I'm going to write down, I want to have more topic about keys, I think, in the future. Okay, Collab Society, once again, thanks, Hayden. Tell us why Sola Scriptura is stupid.
I'm going to leave that to Hayden. Hayden and I are working on a video together. Hayden is probably he's done a lot of interaction with we did a debate together a long time ago with a few years ago against Apologists Studio guys. And went through the entire thing of Sola Scriptura. We have an episode, a conversation coming out in a couple days on Tuesday that will, so while you're getting ready for the election, you guys can listen to this before the results come. And we talk all about divine authority, and Sola Scriptura is the Protestant idea of where ultimate authority rests, and that is with the Bible alone. The Bible is the sole infallible rule of faith and practice for Protestants. And we have a great conversation about that. So I will let him do it. We talk about it in that video. And then he has another one coming out. Hayden is becoming one of the contributors to the channel who I want to get rocking more often.
Right. So one thing that was interesting about this, we've been posting, I dug up your debate with Hayden and Apologia, right? Apologia Church from a couple of years ago, and we've been doing that as shorts. And one of the things that they believe, right, is that they interpret scripture if they're given the gift of faith, and it can't be wrong if they're really given the gift of faith. And there's this really interesting moment in the debate where you say, well, how do you know if you have true faith or saving faith, right, is the term that they use. I didn't know this. We just post the video, but you reached out to me and were like, hey, one of these guys doesn't even believe anymore.
So there,
And they make a very bold claim where they're like, oh yeah, I have saving faith. Tell us about that. That's wild.
So one of the things that the Calvinists believe is that they don't believe that you can, once you're saved, you're always saved. You can't lose your salvation. It's kind of like, as we might say, like a calling election made sure. They're like, yeah, once you have saving faith, you're saved. You can just rejoice in your salvation at that point. And so then there is the question, well, do you have it? And they'll be like, yeah, I do. Like, I'm saved.
And you ask, like, how do you know? What about the people who said they had it and then fell away?
Then they say, well, they didn't really have it. Well, here's the real irony. The guy who literally said that in the debate is no longer considers himself a Christian. Like, so literally one of the two guys in that debate, his name's Daniel Constantino, great guy. We're still friends with him, by the way.
Sure.
Me
It's just
and Hayden,
an
we're still good friends.
Point in the debate.
You're welcome to come on my show anytime. We can talk about your experience. But it is that, but it's one of those things that's like, yeah, you're right. So they would say Daniel never had saving faith. That's what their church would say. They would say Daniel was not really ever a Christian.
Wow.
And so everything he said was not true. It wasn't real.
And he was so devout in his Calvinism that he's one of the few people willing to debate Calvinism.
Oh yeah, he was 100% in. So
that's just amazing.
It's a very, very interesting worldview. Yeah. So
interesting. Okay. Compilation channel. Thank you for the super chat. As someone who is going to be a father soon to a boy, what's your advice on raising children? LDS in the let's see, raising LDS children in a school system that are woke. Me and my wife are concerned about it.
Ooh, well, first of all, congratulations.
Awesome.
Nothing will change your life more than having kids. It's the moment where someone just very clearly becomes more important than you in every respect. And it takes a little time for that to happen in a certain way. There's kind of it isn't like some people say it's right when you first have the baby. For me, it was more like as we went on to the point now, it's like, again, you do anything. I don't care. You do anything you need to me, but don't do anything to my kids. Like that's the softest point. And I think that's the way it is for all people that are parents. So get ready for it. It's amazing. It's wonderful. But as far as school systems, I would do everything you can to keep them out of it. Look at how bad the school system is, get very familiar with it, and look for alternatives. I don't advise people to just kind of turn their kids over to a woke school system. I don't. I have my kids will actually be going to, starting next year, my boys are going to middle school. We have a pretty good elementary school, but in middle school, especially as they start getting older, like this stuff becomes more important. And so I'm putting my kids into a Catholic school. And I'm totally for that. I think it's great. I think interfaith interaction is good. Gets them thinking about this kind of stuff, asking questions. It was very good for me. I went to Catholic schools. Charter school programs, look around depending on the community that you're in. You'll have to look at your options. But I'm full on to the point, like, if you have to move, and you can do it, if you could figure a way to be transferred to somewhere where there's a better school system, I would not advise having your kids just go through a really bad woke, like California school system or something like that. Like I would not advise it. But now if you can't, if it really isn't possible, you need to make sure you're extremely vigilant learning what your kids are learning. And then you also need to make sure that you are tripling your efforts to teach them the truth and to contrast truth with falsehood as they get older. With that in mind, you don't have to worry about it too much when they're little. There's a lot of media hype about like kindergartners getting woke. Like kindergartners don't know what the heck's going on. Okay. But as they get older is when it starts to become more of a concern. So don't be too worried about it short term, but as you're making your longer term plans, you will want to take that into account.
Right on. Okay, I think we're going to close off super chats. Maybe one more after. I mean, we'll finish the ones that are in, but we're coming to our time here in about 15 minutes. Before we go on, Mike has been very vigilant in the chat today. Mike 5000 says the men of the church should all learn jujitsu. I just think that's awesome.
I do think that's a good. I actually want to start like a jujitsu club in my stake as one of those interest-based activities.
That'd be
and
cool.
run it.
I would love. Yeah, have you started one yet?
I haven't.
You hypocrite. I
am a hypocrite.
No, I'm just.
I know. I need to do it.
No, I think that'd be cool. I definitely want to learn some sort of martial arts at some point. I kind of want to do it with my boys though as they get older. I think it'd be really fun to learn together.
Yeah.
James King, Jacob, when can I be a guest on your podcast?
James, you, like everybody else, can be a guest on my podcast when you propose a really killer thumbnail and episode. And I do say that, and I mean that very seriously. The first thing I think about with an episode is there a thumbnail that we can make out of the topic that would really make people in my audience willing to click on it, right? And so that's a huge amount of what it comes down to when it comes to if somebody wants to be a guest on the podcast. You've got to pitch me on something that the audience will be like, ooh, they see the thumbnail and they're like, I'm clicking on that. And my audience has certain things that they tend to be more interested in. And that's this. And I take a look at what are they actually going to click on and what's going to make an impact.
Right.
Those are the two factors that I kind of consider for what I want to actually put out there.
It's got to be good too. I've submitted a thumbnail and got turned down. My first one. That's it. Kevin Nelson. How excited are you for JP's new book?
His new one that's coming out is on is it on the New Testament? I can't remember which one it is.
I don't know.
I think he has one that's coming up on, because he has his one that's out, the 12 More Rules for Life. I don't think he's talking about that one. I am excited for it. However, I will say this. Jordan Peterson, his books are good, but generally everything in his books are already out there in online content. And I much prefer Jordan as a speaker than as a writer. And so generally it's like,
sure,
I just like to listen to his lecture series and the things that he talks about. And so that's kind of my go-to for that. So
do you notice when you go into Jordan mode and you just kind of become Jordan Peterson? Like honestly, like, cause you go on a certain rant and then you'll start talking like him and then you'll pause at and you're just like, is he just quoting him or like, is this, do you notice at all?
I don't know. I don't notice the cadence and stuff. Okay. I notice the reality is though, is that he and I have very similar, we've come to very similar conclusions. And so maybe I just picked up on saying the same kind of things because he says it so well.
Okay.
And so I feel like he's articulated certain points in certain ways that I end up articulating them.
I'm all for it. I can't, like, I can never point to a quote where I'm like, that was Jordan Peterson or whatever, but like you'll go on the rants.
Well, he does do, so I will say this, there are some things he does where he'll kind of be like, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. Stuff like that. Or that's a bad question. Or,
that's a bad question.
Sayings
like there are some sayings that he says, and I have probably picked them up because I'm like, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And you should say it with that sort of an attitude because it merits that. You know what I mean? And so he does have a good way of expressing himself. And so occasionally I may mimic some of the things that he does.
I like that. Okay. Caleb Chandler says, how does the collective witness model account for God yet revealing many great and important things? If we are to compare revelations, with past prophets?
Very simply, and this is what a lot of people don't understand. Carden had trouble understanding this. Like, so many people have trouble understanding this. I'm not saying that something new can't come out, but there's a difference between a change and a contradiction.
Okay.
Think about that for a minute. There's a difference between a change and a contradiction.
Okay, so Heavenly Mother. Apply it to that point.
Heavenly Mother is not a contradiction.
Sure.
There's no contradiction there. What are we contradicting? In fact, I could say that it even does align with astral worship concepts, things like that. Fair enough. So that's a Jordan Petersonism that I picked up.
Fair enough. Sorry, now I got you in your head about.
I know. Now I think every time I pick up his little isms. But when you look at things that are done in the past, expansions are never a problem. The problem is this. If you said, and I'll just use the obvious elephant in the room, marriage is defined as the union between a man and a woman. God created them male and female, and it's just over and over the same concept, over and over and over. And then you have the prophet saying, this can't change. We can't change it. This is the way it is. That's what a marriage is. And then someone was to contradict that. That is a problem. Because what it says is one of those people were wrong. One of those people was just incorrect. They were a false prophet. They were saying something came from God that didn't. Okay? And that is a problem. Because if prophets are constantly contradicting past prophets, again, not a change, not something that's consistent over time and a new expansion, new understanding, more light and truth, but just to say those guys in the past, they were wrong. That's a big difference. And I always say to people who like, well, the prophets one day, gay marriage will be a thing. I go, cool. Well, then I'll just start rejecting the prophets now, because the prophets after them will probably change it back. And then maybe the prophets after that, and like, maybe they all have been wrong about adultery, Future prophets will one day say that's okay. And I have to turn to people and ask them, on what basis are you not saying that anything can change? When you say anything can change, it's like, well, then we don't have any truth. Truth is the thing that does not change. So when you say that anything in our church can change, then I say, well, then you don't have anything that's true. That's what it means. I have no moral truth, because there is no such thing as moral truth. It's just whatever the prophet says. It's moral relativism. It's insane. And so if we're going to claim that we have something true, then it has to last. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be expanded upon. That doesn't mean that it can't. And there's one last thing, because this thing could go on for a long time. But again, my whole change series on the church, I have a whole playlist on the channel, goes through all these issues in great detail. You cannot have, you have a difference between a change and a contradiction. You also have the difference between a truth, which is something that can't change, and the application of a truth. In one context, I might apply a particular truth a particular way. In another context, I might change that. The truth has not been contradicted. The temple endowment, for example, the core of the temple endowment, the covenants that you make with God, the moral truths that it teaches, that's sort of the core of it that doesn't change. The presentation of the endowment has changed, will change, right? So there's a difference between a change and a contradiction. There's a difference between the application of a truth in different contexts versus the underlying principle itself. Because principles, which are truths, can be applied differently in a wide variety of circumstances. So hope that helps.
I want to do, I mean, there's questions in every live stream, a ton of the videos about the collective witness. And I think it would be helpful at some point to have them in one, just respond, question, response, question, response, question, response. Because I think a lot of people want to get on board and be like, this is so helpful. And I've heard other people explain it different than this, but I think the model is good. But I do think there are so many questions, and it's like, we need one place to answer them.
I'm all for that. One
Cool.
last thing on that.
Yeah.
I also want to make a distinction, and Hayden and I start to talk about this, I think, in the episode that comes out in a couple of days. There's a difference between an epistemological collective witness model. Okay. This is, how do I know what is true? That's epistemology.
Sure.
Then there's the ecclesiastical collective witness. Okay. That's totally different.
Yeah.
In ecclesiology, it's about what makes up official doctrine of the church, right? That gets determined by the prophets of God as a collective group. So
that's
when
the
I
one
talk
people
about
have, that's the one people have trouble with, I think, for the most part. That's the one people are constantly asking about.
Yep. And one of the things is even if people have a criticism of my model, I always want to ask them, well, tell me what the better one is.
Sure.
And they almost always refer to, well, you just go with whatever the current prophet says. Like, okay, that's kind of like, that just means you don't care what's true. And then, and then on the other hand, you have the people that are like, well, it's basically whatever I want. It's like, well, that doesn't work either, because that's just every wind of doctrine, and it's just Protestantism.
Right.
No, it's worse than Protestantism, because at least Protestants appeal to the Bible.
Okay, Jeremy Morris. I think this is our last one here. He says, was the earth organized before, during, or after the Great War in heaven? Its placement has no bearing on exaltation. Curious about your take on it.
Shoot. I think it's after. That would be my guess. I don't really know that I've studied this much. I think in the scriptures, it seems to come after. The creation happens after the sort of premortal council. And so that's kind of what I believe. And I believe it was created spiritually, in the sense that the temple is even more, I think, explicit in that now in the temple endowment ceremony, of sort of the spiritual creation happening first, and then Jesus Christ enacting the actual creation. So take that for what it's worth.
Okay, LDS Gnosis, he's going off. He says, I disagree with Jacob's understanding of truth. He's talking about it is relative through perception and only solid, unchanging outside the perception of it. And then he got so fed up, he sent in this super chat. Truth is limited by our perception. It is only solid and unmoving where God is outside of space and time. That is why it seemingly changes.
No. Well, truth is not limited by our perception. What we perceive as true is limited by our perception. Truth is independent of perception by definition. Also, to say that where God is outside of space and time is not a Latter-day Saint conception of God. An embodied God does not live outside of space and time, because it might be in a different space or time, but that, again, Blake Ostler goes into some really interesting stuff. I need to have him on to talk more about the problems with the notion of a timeless God. But there are a few different holes in that LDS Gnosis, but yeah, I would not say that God is or that truth is limited by our perception. Our perception of it is limited by the fact that we're human, but truth is what it is. And if you're going to claim something is true, you're either right or you're wrong.
Okay, just at the final moment here, we got one more from Sheldon Brown. Jesus said he would be in the grave for 3 days and for 3 nights, even as Jonah was in the belly of the whale. But if you add it up, it was only in the grave for 2 days and 2 nights. How does that work? This, for some odd reason, the first thing I thought of was the Halloween question when this came in. I don't know. It's the same vibe.
How does that work? I'm going to say, see, one of the things is that I think there are areas that I'm more of a specialist in, and there are others that I'm less of.
Math. This is just simple math, Jacob.
Yeah. I, first of all, am not the great scriptural theologian. Not to say that I can't speak on these subjects, but when you start getting into every little potential miss thing in scripture, the nice thing about being a Latter-day Saint is you can say that the scriptures are written by fallible people. And so what Jesus actually said and then what the author said might not be the exact same thing. And so I'm not overly concerned about this issue. Also, I think it was 3 days if you include the first day and then the next day.
It was on the third day, right?
It was on the third day that he
but that doesn't
rose.
mean it was 3 days.
But it was the 3 nights issue. The 3 nights
Interesting.
issue is the one that's the question.
I'm gonna put that on the shelf.
I don't know.
Sheldon.
Maybe Sheldon.
That's going on my top shelf.
Maybe on the night after he rose from the dead, he used the tomb as his bed that night. Like just went back in there, like went to sleep there, and we just don't know it.
Oh, there you go.
This isn't only like we talk about primary questions, secondary questions, and then we have the question.
It's a great question. This is a Thanksgiving dinner question, my friend. Bring it up.
Yep, bring it up. But we appreciate it. Appreciate the super chat. Not dogging on you.
That's awesome. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our time, the end of our super chats. This was fun.
It has been fun. And thank you to all of you people who joined us for the live stream. Got some good stuff coming up. Watch out for on election day, our conversation on authority. Also, I'm going to be talking about an interesting experience I've had with John DeLynn. John DeLynn and I have both been talking with one another over the past 8 months. And there's quite a story to tell about that. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to be talking about sexual ethics with someone who has left the church and has become a life coach specializing in sexuality with some really interesting ideas, I think, about that. And we'll have to compare what the sexual order looks like outside of the restored gospel. Also going to be doing a steel man exercise with one of my favorite atheists, Troy. Troy is a great guy, and he keeps saying that I'm misrepresenting atheists' beliefs around ethics and morality. And so I told him I will literally do an entire episode where what we do is we will not stop until he feels that I fully understand his position and can articulate it. And only then can I offer any thoughts on it. So if people ever feel that I just don't understand them, I'm fine with disagreement. We'll disagree all day long. I'm not okay when people say that I misrepresent them or that I don't understand them, because I do not want to attack straw men. I want to actually engage with what people actually think, because I think there's plenty to disagree on, but I think that I don't like to be misunderstood, and I don't like to misunderstand others. So that's what's coming up, everybody.
Right on.
Cool. Any final thoughts?
No, it's too late for that. I got nothing. Thank you. This was fun. I think we should do this. Keep doing this. The questions are fun to see.
Yep. I'm hoping that we can do this about once a month. So stay tuned, everybody. Save your questions, and we'll see you on the next one.